I pulled into the driveway a little after 8, same as I always did on Saturdays, with 2 coffees in the cup holder and a paper bag of groceries from the place on Belmont my mother liked. The morning had that thin spring light where the air still felt like winter, but the sun was trying. I balanced the bag on my hip the way you do when you've done it 100 times, fished the keys out of my jacket, and started up the walk. That's when I saw the man on the porch. He was kneeling by the front door with a tape measure pressed flat against the doorframe. A small notebook opened beside him on the boards. Khaki jacket, glasses pushed up on his head. The kind of calm posture a person has when they're already comfortable in a place. He didn't look up right away. He was writing something down. I slowed without meaning to. The grocery bag shifted against my chest. He noticed the movement and turned, and his face did that polite, settling thing strangers do when they expect you. He smiled. "Morning," he said. "You must be the one dropping off the garage remote." I didn't answer. "The closing paperwork said it'd be here by today," he said. "I figured someone from the family would swing by." He stood up, brushed his hands on his jeans, and held one out like we'd already been introduced somewhere. I looked at the door behind him. The same door my father painted the summer I turned 14. The brass knocker my mother hated and never let him take down. The little chip in the bottom corner where I'd dropped a baseball bat when I was 9. "I'm sorry," I said. "What closing?" His smile didn't move yet, but something behind his eyes did. He glanced down at the bag in my arms, then back at the keys still hanging from my hand. "You're not from the title company," he said. "No." "Oh." He looked at the door, then back at me, and the smile finally went somewhere else. "You might want to call your folks." Every Saturday started the same. Up before 7, on the interstate by 7:30, 40 minutes with the radio low, and a list in my head of what the house needed. Light bulbs, furnace filter, the back gutter that sagged every spring no matter how many times I fixed it. I was 31, single, running a small accounting practice 2 towns over, and my weekends had a shape to them I never questioned. I'd stop at the market on Belmont because my mother liked their bread, grab coffee across the street because my father pretended he didn't want any and then drank half of mine. I'd pull into the driveway, and there he'd be at the kitchen window, watching the road like he'd been waiting since 6. Inside, my mother would already be moving. Linda was 63 and still dyed her hair the same color it was in my baby pictures. She'd ask every single week when I was finally going to settle down, "You're not getting any younger, Daniel." "I know, Mom. There's a girl at church. Her mother asked about you." "Okay." Then my father would come in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. Mark was 65, retired 2 years earlier than he planned, and he still wore a collared shirt to sit at his own kitchen table. Lunch would take 2 hours because he wanted to hear about every client I had. For years ago, they almost lost the house. His pension came in smaller than they'd planned. They sat me down one Sunday, and by the end of the conversation, I'd agreed to take over the mortgage. $2,200 a month. Direct from my account to the bank. I didn't ask for anything in writing. I didn't ask to be added to the deed. My father said, "We'll sort it out properly when things calm down," and I believed him because he was my father. 4 years of payments. A little over $100,000 by the time I stopped counting, and I had stopped counting because counting felt ugly. My younger brother Ethan lived 40 minutes the other direction and came by when there was food already on the table. My father talked about him like he was a project with promise. He talked about me like I was a utility that worked. The Saturday before the one I'm telling you about, something was off. My mother was too bright. She kept circling the same topic in different costumes. How the stairs were hard on her knees. How a one-story place would be easier. How some of the neighbors had moved out to those little patio homes near the lake. "We've been thinking about downsizing one day," she said. "One day when—" "Oh, eventually." My father didn't look up from his food. There was a manila folder on the counter by the toaster. Thick. The kind of thick that means paperwork, not mail. I'd seen my father move it once already from the table to the counter, like he was keeping it in his line of sight. After lunch, I walked over for more coffee and picked it up without thinking, just to move it out of the way. Leave that, Daniel. He was on his feet faster than a man with a bad back should be. I wasn't going to open it. I said, leave it. He took it out of my hand, not rough, but not gentle, slid it into the drawer under the toaster, and pushed the drawer shut with his hip. Just insurance junk, he said. Nothing for you to worry about. My mother had gone very quiet at the sink. Insurance for what? The house. You know how they are. They send you a pound of paper every year to tell you nothing changed. Okay, eat your pie, Daniel. I ate my pie. We talked about the Phillies. When I left, he walked me to the car the way he always did, one hand on my shoulder at the driver's door, and told me to drive safe. I backed down the driveway and looked up at the house the way you look at something you own a piece of. I told myself he'd tell me next week if it mattered. That was Saturday. The next Saturday, I pulled in a little after 8 with 2 coffees and a paper bag of groceries, and there was a man on the porch with a tape measure. 8 months before the man with the tape measure showed up, Ethan moved back in. His business had failed. Some kind of e-commerce thing he'd been vague about for 2 years, and then suddenly wasn't doing anymore. He arrived with 2 duffel bags and his usual loose confidence, like the whole thing had been a detour he'd planned. Within a week, he had a drawer in the kitchen, a spot on the couch, and my mother making his eggs the specific way he liked them every Saturday morning while I carried groceries in from the car. My father laughed differently around Ethan. Quicker, lighter. Ethan would say something halfway clever about whatever game was on, and my father would crease up like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. I've been telling that man stories for 31 years and getting a nod and a slow blink. It wasn't something I wanted to be bothered by. I was bothered by it. Ethan was 28, charming in that effortless way that works better when you're 20 than when you're approaching 30, and he moved between plans the way some people move between rooms. He always had something in the works. The something just never seemed to arrive. One Saturday at lunch, he leaned back in his chair and said, almost to no one, "The market's insane right now. People are getting wild numbers for houses like this." I looked up. My father nodded slowly, the way he did when he was already thinking about something and the conversation had just caught up to him. My mother kept her eyes on her plate. Nobody said anything else. Ethan moved on to something about a podcast he'd been listening to, and my father followed him there, and the moment closed over like it had never opened. I didn't push it. I didn't know why I didn't push it. Driving home that evening, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, calling from a number I usually saw on holidays and nothing else. "Just checking in," she said. "Making sure everything's okay with your parents' plans." "What plans?" A pause. Not a confused pause. A caught one. "Oh, honey, forget I said anything. You know how your mother talks. I probably misunderstood something at church." "What did she say at church, Carol?" "Daniel, I really think I got the wrong end of it. Just talk to them, okay? I'm sure it's nothing." She was off the phone before I could ask anything else. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a gas station and tried to work out what my mother would have said at church to her sister about plans that would require walking back this carefully. The folder in the drawer. Ethan's comment about the market. My mother staring at her plate. I called my father's number. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. The following Saturday, I got there an hour early. My mother was in the kitchen when I walked in, and I didn't do the usual routine. No coffee, no groceries on the counter, no small talk about the weather. "Are you planning to sell the house?" She laughed. It came out fast, the way a laugh does when it was already waiting. "Sell the house? Where would we even go, Daniel?" She waved her hand like the idea was slightly absurd and turned toward the hallway. "Come help me with something, actually. There's a box in the spare room I can't shift on my own." The box was heavy and sealed with packing tape, and when I got it into the hallway and she peeled back one corner to check the label, I saw the edge of photo album. Then another. The whole box was photo albums, packed and sealed and ready to go somewhere. She saw me looking. "Just reorganizing," she said. "The spare room's gotten out of hand." I didn't say anything to that. I found my father in the garage 20 minutes later, standing at his workbench, doing nothing in particular. He looked up when I came in and went back to what he wasn't doing. "Dad, are you selling the house?" He was quiet long enough that I started to think he was just going to let it sit there. Then he set down the wrench he'd been holding for no reason and turned around. "You worry too much," he said. His voice was even. Warm, almost. "This is your home, too. You know that." He crossed the garage and put his hand on my shoulder the same way he always did, firm and brief, and then he walked past me toward the side door. "Dad, I need you to actually answer me." The door closed behind him. I stood in the garage for a while looking at his workbench. The wrench sitting on the edge. A coffee mug with an inch of cold coffee in it. A notepad with nothing written on it. That night I was home, and I opened my banking app for something unrelated, and I saw it immediately. The mortgage payment I'd sent 3 days ago. Back in my account. The full amount, sitting there like it had never left, with no note attached, no explanation, no missed call from my father or a number I didn't recognize. Just the money. Returned. I put my phone face down on the table. There was only one reason a mortgage payment comes back. Either the account it was going to didn't exist anymore, or someone had made sure it wouldn't be accepted. Either way, the decision had already been made, and nobody had said a word to me. A cousin texted me on Wednesday. Just a photo, no message with it. He'd taken it through his car window, driving past my parents' street. No sign in the yard, but there was a lockbox on the front door. The black kind that realtors use, hanging off the handle like it belonged there. I left my office at lunch and drove past the house. I didn't stop. I just drove past slowly enough to confirm what I'd already seen in the photo. Lockbox. Front door. No other explanation visible from the street. I called my mother from the parking lot of a sandwich place I didn't end up going into. "The lockbox on your front door?" I said. "What's that for?" "Oh, that's for the contractor. We're getting quotes on the bathroom finally." "Which contractor?" "A beat. Henderson. The one your father uses." "Henderson doesn't do bathrooms. He does driveways." "No, not Henderson. The other one. Kowalski. Or Kowalski's son. Actually, I think it's the son now who runs it." "Mom." "Daniel, hold on. Something's burning." A sound in the background that may or may not have been anything. "I have to go. I'll call you later." She didn't call me later. I sat with it until that evening, and then I called Ethan. He picked up on the third ring, and I could hear people in the background, music, the loose noise of a room where nobody was worried about anything. "Hey," he said, "is the house being sold?" A pause. Not a confused one. "Dude," he said, "that's between you and them. I'm staying out of it." He hung up. "Now I don't know." "Now what are you talking about?" He knew exactly what I was asking, and he answered it without answering it. And then he went back to whatever room that was. I thought about how that sentence was structured. That's between you and them. Not us. Not the family. You and them. Like I was on one side of something, and everyone else had already found their position on the other side, and was waiting to see what I'd do. The question wasn't whether the house was being sold anymore. The question was how long they'd all known while I kept sending payments and showing up every Saturday with groceries and coffee and a list of things the house needed. He went straight to what he wanted, and I already knew it was going to cost me something. Wait, that's not right. Let me give you the actual act. Saturday morning. Coffee in the cup holder, groceries on the passenger seat. 40 minutes on the interstate with the radio low. The same drive I'd made 100 times. I don't know what I was expecting when I turned onto their street. Maybe my father in the driveway, ready to finally talk. Maybe some explanation that would make the lockbox and the return payment and Ethan's careful non-answer fit together into something that made sense. What was there was a silver SUV parked where I usually parked, and a woman on the porch with a clipboard and a tape measure. She heard my car and turned and smiled the way people smile when they're happy and have no reason not to be. "Hi there," she said. "Are you family?" "Yes," I said. "I thought so. I'm Rebecca." She came down 2 steps and shook my hand. Her grip was warm and certain. She had the easy manner of someone who had just gotten something she'd worked hard for. "We're so thrilled." The whole process was just so smooth. I looked at the door behind her. The brass knocker. The chip in the bottom corner from the baseball bat. "The closing was Thursday," she said. "Your parents were wonderful. So sweet, honestly." She tilted her head a little. They said the whole family was excited for them. I didn't say anything. She must have taken my expression for emotion of a different kind, because she turned and lifted something from the top of her clipboard. A printed sheet, folded once. She held it out to me. I have a copy of the listing if you want it. As a keepsake. I know it's hard to see the family home go. I took it because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I looked down at it. There was a photo of the house from the street, the same angle I'd driven past 3 days ago. Sold banner across the corner in red. List price and sale price printed neatly underneath. I thanked her. I don't know why I thanked her. She had done nothing wrong. I got back in my car and sat there. I opened my banking app and went back through 4 years of payment history. Every month, the same amount leaving my account. I never added it up all at once before because adding it up felt like keeping score, and keeping score felt like it meant something about who I was. But I added it up now. I sat in front of a house I had paid for and added up what it had cost me. It was roughly what I would have needed for a down payment on a place of my own. A real one, with my name on it. The listing was still in my hand. I set it on the passenger seat on top of the grocery bag, and I looked through the windshield at the house. Rebecca had gone back inside. The door was closed. The easier thing, the genuinely easier thing, was to drive away. Never bring it up. Let them have their clean start and their patio home near the lake. Let Ethan keep being the one they called when they wanted company. Let the whole thing settle into the past where it couldn't require anything from me anymore. Part of me wanted that. The part that was tired. But they had told Rebecca that the whole family was excited for them. They had packed the photo albums and returned my payment and handed over the keys on Thursday, and not one of them had picked up a phone. I started the car. I didn't drive away. I didn't go to them that afternoon. I drove home, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at my kitchen table with 4 years of bank statements and a yellow highlighter. Every mortgage payment, one by one. It took 40 minutes. By the end, the pages looked like evidence, because that's what they were. I stacked them neatly, tapped the edges straight the way you do when you want your hands to have something useful to do, and I put them in a folder. Then I opened the family group chat. My parents, Ethan, and my 2 aunts, Carol and Diane, who had apparently been helping my mother with a move without anyone thinking to tell me there was a move to help with. I typed, Astra's dinner at my place Sunday. 7 o'clock. I have something I want to share with everyone. Asterisk. I put my phone face down and went to make fresh coffee. It buzzed before the coffee finished. My mother. What's this about honey? Is everything okay? I left it there. An hour later, my father called. I watched his name on the screen until it stopped. 12 minutes after that, he called again. I watched that one too. The voicemail notification came through, and I let it sit for a while before I played it. The first one was short. His voice was easy, almost casual, the same voice he used when he wanted something to seem smaller than it was. The second one was different. I could hear him choosing his words. Son, whatever you think you heard, or whatever someone told you, let's just talk before you do anything. Okay, just call me back. We can sort this out, just the two of us, before it becomes a whole thing. That's all I'm asking. Before it becomes a whole thing. I set the phone down next to the folder. He wasn't calling because he was sorry. He was calling because Sunday was coming and the wrong people were on the guest list, and he wanted to get to me before the room filled up. 40 years I'd known that man, and I could still recognize the difference between him reaching out and him getting ahead of something. I didn't call him back. They all showed up. My mother came through the door with a pie in both hands and a smile that was working very hard. She kissed my cheek and went straight to the kitchen like it was any other Sunday. Ethan came in behind her with his hands in his pockets and found a spot near the window and stayed there. He hadn't looked at me directly since he walked in. My father shook my hand, which he hadn't done since I was maybe 20, and said the apartment looked good. The aunts sat on the couch, close together. Carol had the careful look of someone who'd been told what to expect and was hoping to be wrong. I made dinner. I served it. I sat at the head of my own table and let them eat and kept the conversation moving through nothing. The weather, Carol's knee, whether Ethan had any new prospects. My father relaxed a little by the second helping. My mother laughed at something, and the laugh was almost real. I waited until the plates were cleared. Then I set the folder on the table and opened it and laid the stack of highlighted statements flat where everyone could see them. Nobody spoke. When was the house sold? I said. I was looking at my father. He shifted in his chair. Daniel, we were going to tell you. When? He didn't answer that. My mother put her fork down. It was our house, Daniel. We didn't know you a meeting. I slid the top page across the table toward the center. Whose name is on every one of those payments for 4 years? You offered, Ethan said. He said it quietly, to the table, not to me. I looked at him. How much of the sale price are you getting? The room went very still. Ethan said nothing. He picked up his water glass and put it back down without drinking from it. Carol leaned forward slightly and looked at my mother. Wait. Her voice was careful, like she was making sure she had it right. Daniel was paying the mortgage? My mother looked at her hands. My father straightened in his chair, and when he spoke, his voice had the flat, final quality he used when he decided a conversation was over. We sold it. We didn't tell you. That was our decision. Okay, I said. I'll let that sit for exactly as long as it needed to. Then this is mine. I told him I was done. No more Saturdays. No more repairs. No more showing up with groceries and coffee and a list of things the house needed. And the 4 years of mortgage payments, I wanted them back. Every one of them. They could work out how and when, or I could let a lawyer work it out for them. My mother started crying. Not the quiet kind. My father stood up. He had 4 inches on me, and he'd used that his whole life without ever having to say so. You're being dramatic, he said, and ungrateful. Everything we gave you, and you're going to sit here and do this in front of your family. I walked to the door and opened it. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at my mother, who was still crying, and he said her name once. She got up. Ethan followed them out without speaking. My father stopped in the doorway and turned back like he had one more thing, and then he didn't say it, and he left. I closed the door. Carol and Diane stayed on the couch. Diane had both hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Carol was looking at the statements still spread across the table. He was really paying it, Carol said. Not a question, just the thing becoming real in her mouth. For years, I said. They stayed another 20 minutes. They asked quiet questions, and I answered them. When they left, Carol stopped at the door and looked at me in that way older women sometimes do when they're deciding whether to say the full thing. She said, "You deserve better than that, honey." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to say anything back. By Wednesday, my mother's version was already moving through the family. A cousin called me, not unkindly, and relayed what he'd heard. That I'd invited everyone to dinner and then demanded money. That I made my mother cry in front of the whole family. That I'd always had a chip on my shoulder about Ethan, and this was really about that. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting. 3 hours later, the same cousin called back. Carol had gotten to him first and had been specific. Amounts. Dates. For years. The cousin was quiet on the phone in a different way than he'd been quiet the first time. I didn't ask him to do anything with it. He did something with it anyway. By Thursday evening, I'd gotten 2 texts from people I hadn't spoken to in months, both versions of the same message, that they hadn't known and that it wasn't right. My mother's story had moved fast. Carol's version moved faster because it had numbers in it. Ethan showed up Friday night without calling. I heard the knock and opened the door, and there he was, hands in his jacket pockets, doing the expression he used when he needed something and knew the direct approach wouldn't work. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" I stepped into the doorway without opening it wider. "They're really struggling with this," he said. "Mom especially. She's not doing well." He paused to let that land. "I'm just asking if you can find a way to let it go. For her sake. You know how she is." "No," I said. "Daniel, come on. You got your point across. Everyone heard it. You don't have to keep." "No, Ethan." Something shifted in his face. The soft angle dropped, and what was under it was less patient. "You know, they're not going to pay you back the whole thing," he said. "You know that. So what is this actually about?" "Close the door on your way out," I said, and I went back inside. The letter came Saturday. My father's handwriting on the envelope, which I hadn't seen in years. Inside was a check and a single handwritten page, short, the kind of short that means someone drafted it several times and kept cutting. It wasn't an apology. There was no sorry anywhere in it. But near the bottom, in his careful blocky print, he'd written, "You were right that we should have told you." I read it twice. Then I set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for a while. The check was not the full amount. It was enough to matter and not enough to settle it. And I think he knew that and wrote it anyway, because it was what he could make himself do. Maybe that was its own kind of truth about who he was. I deposited the check that afternoon. I folded the note and put it in the back of the folder with the bank statements. I didn't write back. The closing on my place was on a Tuesday morning in October. I signed the paperwork at a table in a title office with a woman I'd never met who walked me through every page and asked if I had questions and meant it. I had one or two. She answered them. When it was done, she shook my hand and slid the keys across the table, and that was that. I drove to the new place and let myself in and stood in the kitchen for a minute. Small house. Quiet street. My name on the deed. I set the keys on the counter and left them there. The down payment had come from the return money, and from 7 months of Saturdays, I'd stopped spending on someone else's house. It added up faster than I expected. Time has a dollar value when you stop giving it away. Carol came by about 6 weeks after I moved in. She brought a box and set on my kitchen table without a lot of preamble, which was her way. "These were in the donate pile," she said. During the move, I took them. Photo albums. The ones that had been packed and sealed in the spare room the Saturday I'd carried the box into the hallway and seen the edge of the first one. I opened the top album. My parents young, in a kitchen I didn't recognize. Me at maybe 3, sitting on my father's shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. Ethan is a baby. Christmases. A summer at the lake I'd completely forgotten. "They were always more yours than anyone else's," Carol said. "You showed up." I didn't say anything back, but I think she understood that as agreement. She visited a few times after that. Not often, just enough. She was the one person who had been in that room on Sunday and come out the other side, still wanting to know how I was doing. That meant something I didn't need to name. My parents and Ethan were still there in the way that family stays there. A call on birthdays. A text at Christmas that I answered briefly and without feeling much. My mother had stopped asking when I was going to settle down, maybe because the answer had become obvious, or maybe because she understood she'd lost the standing to ask. I didn't go back to Saturdays. I didn't go back to the old street. I had no reason to drive past the house that belonged to someone else now, a house I'd paid for the right to lose. What I noticed, more than anything, was the mornings. I'd wake up in my own place, make coffee in my own kitchen, and the day would just be the day. No list in my head of what someone else's house needed. No 40 minutes on the interstate. No pretending the nod and the shoulder pat was the same thing as being seen. One morning, maybe 4 months in, I was standing at the counter with my coffee, and I realized I hadn't thought about any of them in over a week. Not with anger. Not with the particular exhaustion that had lived in my chest for longer than I wanted to admit. Just not at all. I drank my coffee. I looked at the keys on the counter. Mine. I spent a long time thinking I was doing the right thing by never asking for anything back. Maybe that was true, but there's a difference between generosity and just not keeping score because the score was too painful to look at. I learned that late. I'm living with what it cost me and also with what it gave me, which is this place, this quiet, and mornings that belong to no one but me. I'm over at where silence ends. Have you ever kept showing up for someone long after you should have asked what you were getting in return?